The French. Holy blue, they're a sophisticated bunch, with their haute couture, haute cuisine, and their haute croissant. And they vraiment know how to design a modern board game. Especially this man, Bruno Cathala. Il est un dieu des jeux, mais pourtant est un homme de terre. Forgive me, my high school French teacher insisted I would find a use for her lessons, and I'm terrified of disobeying her. Bruno Cathala is the best French board game designer who has ever lived. That much I'm sure of. He's innovative, prolifique, avant-garde, and other adjectives that English speakers won't understand. But which are the best of his oeuvre, and which deserve to be run over? Well, I've played 50 games or expansions designed by Monsieur Cathala, and I will rank them, treating them with as much reverence as they would types of butter or cigarettes. So let's talk tiers, starting at the derrière. We're skipping the F tier entirely. Bruno Cathala doesn't give an F. His worst games are just not that bad. Our bottom tier is Bruno Cathala. Much like a catheter, these games are painful and you have no intention of revisiting the experience if you can help it. Above that, the We Don't Talk About Bruno. These games are dull and not worth talking about. Then we reach More Goatee Than Goat. These are not the greatest of all time, but they're not bad, they're just average. Then it gets good. The next rank is Formidable, which combines formidable with table, just a bit of English wordplay that we call a portmanteau. These games are for my table. Translation, I want to play them. But I'd rather play some creme brulee, or if you're in Catalonia, crema catalana. These games are the perfect dessert. Once you crack the surface, you'll find a rich, sumptuous game waiting for you underneath. And finally, our top tier is French Revolutionaries. These games are so good, they could overthrow a monarchy, which is why I play them so often. I'm imagining Bruno stood at the guillotine as Monopoly's Mr. Moneybags loses his head. And on that note, let's get to the games. We start in 2003 with his first notable game, Queen's Necklace, and this is a collaboration with Bruno Faidutti, who is the designer of Citadels and Diamant. And this is a really common theme in this video, that Bruno Cathala loves to collaborate. It's like Cathala is the French for collaborate, because there are more games in this video that he's designed with other people than he's designed on his own. And so many different partners, collaborators that he's worked with. But Queen's Necklace is kind of a simple card game. You are collecting jewels and selling them. There's a couple of interesting mechanisms. There's one about like the rarity, so you sort of all decide to sell, but the thing that there is the least of is then worth more. So it's kind of got this cool mechanism that makes me think a bit of modern art. But there's quite a lot of take that in this game. Power cards that you play on each other that feels a bit dated now. Possibly that's Bruno Faidutti's influence, or just something that you don't see as much in modern games, or it wouldn't necessarily be quite as harsh. I think this one's fine, but I wouldn't really choose to go back to it. I'm giving it more goatee than goat. In 2005, we've got Shadows over Camelot, which was a big hit, a big Days of Wonder game, and one of the first hidden traitor board games, taking it from a party game like Werewolf and putting a whole board and like more stuff going on. This predates Battlestar Galactica. This is a co-design with the late Serge Leger, who designed Nidavellir and Mare Nostrum. To me, feels a bit dated now. It's got this weird thing each turn where you pick something bad to happen, but you get to decide. A lot of the turns just feel a bit like you do the obvious thing. Often you don't do a whole lot. Sometimes you might just move. That's a whole turn. That's all you get to do. There are some interesting bits where you have to like play pairs of cards in a full house face down into different quests to complete them. And so that's a bit tricky. And then the saboteurs can play like bad cards to send that the wrong way. But as the saboteur, you feel like you don't have a whole lot of agency. I know it's not going to be a popular opinion, but I think this game is a bit dated, a bit overrated. I wouldn't be going back to it, and I'm giving it We Don't Talk About Bruno. The next year came Cleopatra and the Society of Architects, which is also a big Days of Wonder game, and really stood out at the time because it's got these 3D plastic Egyptian statues that just look so good on the table. And I hunted this game down, desperate to have something that looked so cool. Because at the time, that was a really rare thing. Of course, these days, like every other game is full of plastic that's far more impressive than that. This game has got a really cool mechanism, which is this corruption mechanism. You're sort of taking shortcuts, doing something because you want to do it, but you're taking a punishment for it later. You're taking on this corruption that could cost you points at the end of the game. And we're going to see that in other games of Bruno's later on in this video. It's also got this cool thing where the cards, they're double-sided, and so you sort of have half the deck one way up and half the deck the other way up, and then shuffle them together. It's just kind of a cool idea that you don't see very much. But I find this game a bit drawn out. You're collecting resources to ultimately trade in to build stuff. And I feel that the buildings, they seem more significant when you look at the game, but they're really just like the end result of what you do in the game. And the game, to me, is kind of plodding. So the corruption mechanism sort of redeems it a bit, but I'd say this is more goatee than goat. In 2007 came Jamaica, another big hit. It really came out of the gate with a lot of popular games in those early days. This is co-designed with Malcolm Braff and Sebastian Porchon, who designed Jaipur. And this is a pirate-themed racing game. And you're also kind of getting fights with each other. There's this interesting action mechanism where you roll 2 dice, and one of them will be a day action and a night action, and you pick secretly which action you're going to do. And some of them are like collecting resources, some will be moving. You can move forward and backwards. If you end up in the same space as someone, you'll have a fight, who's got the most gunpowder. A nice bit of interaction. To me, it doesn't feel like a race game because it's not the first one to get to the end wins. It doesn't fully give the kind of pirate thing you want, even though there is a bit of combat there. And I found it was a bit too long for a family weight game. So I like some of it, but I just feel like there are better examples within those genres out there. So I'm giving this more goatee than goat. And you're probably watching this thinking, well, he just doesn't like Bruno Cathala's games. And that isn't true, because in 2009, we have Cyclades, and this is a big area control game with a really interesting auction mechanism. It's a co-design with Ludovic Malblanc. It's his first big game. You know, this one might take you a couple of hours to play. You've got a map of the Cycladian islands, you have your troops and boats, and you are at war with each other. But the way you do anything in the game is by getting the favor of the gods. You're bidding on the gods to be able to use their powers. So Poseidon will let you put more ships on the board and move those ships around. And if you don't have control of Poseidon that round, you can't do that. And so each of the gods allows you to do something different in the game. And so each round you are bidding on the ability to use those gods. And only one person will get to do for each god. The auction works like Amun-Re or Stockpile, where you have these bidding tracks. So you outbid someone with a higher number, that bumps them off. So they have to now go on to a different god. And that phase ends when everyone is on a different auction track. You've all kind of settled. And that's the action you get to use. But you have to spend gold to do that. And you need that gold to be able to buy troops and boats and do other things in the game. So you've really got a penny pinch, because if you spend all of your money just outbidding someone else, then that's useless. It's such an intelligent design. It's very strange, the kind of coming together of an auction and then this area control thing. They don't feel like they should mesh, and it creates quite a different game. You know, you look at the board and you think, oh, this is like Risk. It's so not like Risk in so many ways. And one of the things that I think people could, you know, be down against the game for is it's slow progress. You can only attack on land every time you get control of areas. Well, that might be many rounds before you even get to use that again. And so to go to someone else's island, you need to have ships. You need to control ships in the sea to be able to hop your people across to their island. So you need to have Poseidon to get the ships down, then Ares to... There's just lots of steps, which means that there's strategy, right? You really have to plan many rounds in advance. But it just also means that it's slow progress. You're trying to also control islands to put buildings down, because to win the game, you just need 2 metropolises. And to get a metropolis, there's a few different ways, but one way is to have 4 different types of building. But of course, people can come and steal them off you, so you don't have to go to the lengths of building a metropolis yourself. You can just build a powerful army and go and steal it off someone that already has them. And so the end game can kind of become one of those slightly kingmaking things of like, oh, I steal that off you, and then they get a chance to steal that off them. And, you know, it all kind of reaches a climax. There's a lot of fun in that too. So I really like Cyclades. I'm giving it a creme brulee because I know there's something better coming later. Also in 2009 is Dice Town, and this one's also co-designed by Ludovic Maublanc. This is a Wild West themed dice game that on the surface looks a bit like you're playing Perudo because you're rolling these poker dice in these plastic cups, but you're trying to use those dice to control locations in this Wild West town. So if you've got the most jacks, then you'll control this location, or the most aces will get you this one. You're re-rolling your dice. You actually have to pay for re-rolls, which is a really cool mechanism. You're trying to get a better poker hand than your rivals, so you can see what dice they're setting aside, what they're gunning for. It's just a really nice interaction and competition, that core heart of the game with the dice that I really like in this game. And the different locations, like you're digging for gold, you're robbing a bank to get money, you're going to the shop that's getting you these special cards. You know, there's a bit of take that in there, but it fits the Wild West theme, and because it's a lighter family game, it kind of works. The person with the best poker hand gets like a property, and that's points towards the end of the game. It's got quite a lot of like steps because you've got to play through each location and work out who won it. There's something really fun and family friendly about the heart of the game. And even though it probably goes a bit long, I really enjoy it. I'm giving it a creme brulee. Also in 2009, and also co-designed with Ludovic Maublanc, did they live together in this year? Is Mr. Jack in New York. And this is a 2-player only deduction game where one person plays as Jack the Ripper, Mr. Jack, and the other plays as the detective trying to catch them. And you've got these 8 characters across this board. It's quite abstract. The detectives don't know which of those characters is Mr. Jack, and so you'll both be moving them, getting them in different locations, and the detective is trying to kind of split the group, make some visible and others invisible, so that they start to eliminate who the possibility is, whereas Mr. Jack is trying to keep them all either invisible or visible so that the group never gets split and they never get any closer to working out who they are. Meanwhile, they're trying to escape. It's a very puzzly game. You've got all these street lamps and parks that you can hide in and buildings that are blocking your path. And each of the characters has a special action, and you kind of take it in turns to use one of those actions that then twist the board. There's so much to keep abreast of, and I find this game gives me so much analysis paralysis. When I first got into games, this was really hyped as like one of the 2-player only games, and I feel like it's not as popular as it once was. And there's also Mr. Jack. This is a sequel to Mr. Jack. I've never played the original, and this one I believe is more complicated, which is definitely not for me. There's a really clever game under there, and for the right person's brain, it is magic. You know, I can't fault the design, but it isn't for me. The AP is crazy. So I give it more goatee than goat. In 2010 comes another Mr. Jack sequel, Mr. Jack Pocket, also co-designed with Ludovic Maublanc. This was clearly a popular series. There's also Phantom the Opera, which isn't in this video, that came later. But this one is a much condensed, simpler idea. So I prefer it because it's easier to get your head around. You've got this 3x3 grid of square tiles. Each of them has a character on, and then the detectives around the outside. And the tiles have streets on, and the detectives are trying to see down the streets. But if you twist one of the pieces, you rotate it, then the street might get blocked off. They can't see it anymore. And you split the different actions, Sherlock, Watson, and the dog. It's, again, like pretty AP inducing, and both of these games can make you feel quite stupid. But with this one, it's less punishing, it's less tricky, and it's a really small box and just quite a quick 2-player game. So I really like this one. I'm giving it formidable. Also in 2010 is Sobek, which is a game that I've always wanted a copy of. I think I've only played it on Board Game Arena. It's a set collection card game where you're set in ancient Egypt in a market, you're collecting goods and then trying to sell them as sets. And so you've got this row of cards. You can take the first one for free, but if you jump over that and take something further into the market, you'll take those other cards as corruption, face down on your corruption pile. So we've got that mechanism back, which I love. For each set that you score, you've got these scarab beetle symbols, and they are the multiplier. So if you've got 4 cards with no Scarab Beetles on, they're worth nothing. You need the Scarab Beetles to actually make them worth something, and we're going to see that mechanism come back. And then there's rewards for finishing sets early. There's sort of like, do you wait and make a bigger set, or do you go early because you're going to get those rewards? Lots of cool ideas going on here. I wish I'd played it in real life. I think it might, be a tad long, and there is a remake of this coming later in the video. But for now, formidable. In 2011, we have Dicetown Wild West, which is an expansion to Dicetown. And this is quite a big change to the game, because before you had these locations. If you had the most jacks, you would win the location. Everyone else with jacks was screwed. Now there's a runner-up prize. So if you have the second most jacks, you're going to get something else. And so for every location, there's a second thing that you can win. So you can win like a first place here and a second place here, depending on what dice you have. It makes the game feel fairer. It's less punishing because you typically go home with something. In some ways, I don't know if it fits the theme as well, and it's not quite as kind of mean and cutthroat as the original game, but I think it probably makes the game more palatable for a larger group. And it means there's more to consider. Perhaps, you can be a bit more thinking in kind of what dice you go for, but it also means that there's a bit more to do. There's more stages to work through each round. So I like this one. I don't know if you need it, as is true for most expansions. I'm giving it formidable. In 2012, we have Akaya, which is a 2-player only abstract game, a very small, short game, where you've got this grid of tiles with art on them, and you are putting your pieces down to claim spots. You're trying to create a 4 in a row or a 2x2 grid to win the game. But when you place onto a spot, you take that tile, and that's got kind of 2 things on it. That is forcing your opponent to then take a tile that matches one of those 2 things. And so you're forcing them then to go somewhere else. So there is this inherent strategy. Every piece you take, you'll then know where that's allowing your opponent to take, which is interesting because we see that in other games of his coming up. It's kind of a pattern of his abstract games. This one is cute and it works, but it's over very quickly. There's not a lot to it. And so for me, it's more goatee than goat. Moving to 2014 is 5 Tribes Djinns of Nakala. This is one of his bigger, meatier games. It's also a Days of Wonder game. It's set in the world of 1001 Nights. You've got this grid of location tiles covered in meeples of different colors. Those are the 5 tribes. And it steals ideas from Mancala. You are picking up a collection of meeples from a tile and then dropping them off one by one on other tiles as you go. But it's the tile where you finish that is really important, because you will be placing that colored meeple there and it will combine with the meeples there to give you an action. The more of that color, the better the action. And you also get an action from the tile. Each of the different locations gives you different actions. There's so much to think about. It's such a tactical game, and it's really about spotting opportunities. You start to sort of learn how to see the board, like, Neo looking at the Matrix, because there's a lot going on, but you're trying to spot these opportunities, which means you can get real AP in the game, because often you really want to do this one thing and you're trying to find where you can do it, and sometimes you just can't, and it's hard to accept that when there's so much possibility. So lots of different paths to scoring in this game. It's a very clever one. The AP and the length, for me, let it down a bit, but I have had some fun games of it. It's formidable. Also in 2014 is Haru Ichiban. This is a 2-player only abstract game where you are gardeners trying to get your color flowers in certain arrangements on these lily pads. And it's got this mechanism of you pick a number and the lowest one will go first. They are the little gardener and they get to move one of the lily pads, but then the bigger gardener gets to put one of their flowers wherever they want. Slightly different control depending on whether you play the lower or higher number. So there's a bit of mind games of which number do you think your opponent's going to play and what can you then control. It's quite a simple game. I'd describe it as cozy, especially in its aesthetic. At the same time, there's just a slight fussiness with the steps of each turn. It feels like it wants to be simpler. I would rather play an abstract game that's just a bit smoother than this, that you're not having to constantly remember these steps. As it is, I had some fun with it at the time. I haven't kept this game around. I'd give it more goatee than goat. The last 5 games were all solo designs, which is quite unheard of for Bruno, but we come in 2014 to Abyss, which is a co-design with Charles Chevalier, and this is a deep sea underwater theme. You've got these really hideous beasts. The idea is that it's a political system, but I don't feel like any political stuff comes through in the actual gameplay. But you're collecting these underwater politicians and you're drafting cards and buying them, and then you're trying to collect keys that also will unlock more scoring opportunities. I'm not a fan of how this game plays out. You draft these cards, on my turn I will flip a card, and then I have to offer it to every player in turn, and then that might get taken, and I flip another one and offer it up again, and it's just so drawn out, the process in which you get the cards, and then they just go into your hand, and then you actually have to buy them to put them out in front of you. It just feels like so much effort to achieve so little, and I just felt that the game really bogged down for that. The theme, the art does absolutely nothing for me. I feel like the gameplay underneath is just quite a basic card game that's been blown out into this massive box and quite a long game that just totally doesn't warrant it. So for me, this is Bruno Cathala. In 2015, there's the expansion to 5 tribes, the Artisans of Nacala, and this makes the board even bigger, adds more location tiles, it adds another tribe. They have item tiles that you can collect, so it's another way to score points. So it fits the game quite well because it just adds more. It does feel like part of the game, but at the same time, I don't think you need it. It doesn't sort of stick out or jar, and it adds these mountains that make things a bit harder to move around on the board because now the map's even bigger. So for me, this one is okay, it's formidable. Also in 2015 is the 2nd or 3rd edition of Mission Red Planet, which is a co-design with Bruno Cathala. This is an area control game set on Mars, where you're sending your troops to Mars and trying to steal bits of it for your own, collecting resources to get the most points. It's a really interactive game with some really cool mechanisms. You have these rocket ships that fill up with troops. As soon as they're full, they fly to the location that they've got, like their destination, and send your troops there. So you're all trying to sort of clamber onto these ships as quickly as possible. And it's got a really cool card mechanism that seems borrowed from Citadels, one of Bruno Cathala's games, where you are picking a number card. They all have actions, but then you count down from 9 to 1, like a spaceship launch. You sort of announce, number 9, does anyone have number 9? And if someone does, they reveal it and take their action. So they get to go first. They potentially have first dibs on these spaceships, but the actions lower down the numbers are much stronger. So will it get there? Will you have a chance to take those ones, or are you risking everything by even picking that card? I really love that mechanism at the heart of the game. But for me, there's some end game stuff. There's these cards that you slot under the board, they get revealed at the end, that can really swing the points. And it's very hard to anticipate them or do anything about them. And it can really just kind of screw with everything. So I don't personally think it's a perfect design. I haven't kept it, but I've had a lot of fun with the kind of heart of the game. And I think it's worthy of a formidable. In 2015 comes Seven Wonders Duel. This is a co-design with Antoine Bowser, the original designer of Seven Wonders and Takenoko, and this is a 2-player only version of Seven Wonders. It's quite a redesign of that game, but it still carries on some ideas, such as the theme, which is that you're an ancient civilization trying to build up and ultimately build wonders to get points. But this 2-player version adds in these instant win conditions. So you've got a military track that is like a tug of war between the two sides. And if you pull it all the way to your side, then you instantly win the game. And then you've got these science symbols. If you collect all of the science symbols, then you instantly win the game. So you're trying to stop your opponent from getting them. But the key thing that it does differently from Seven Wonders, which was originally a hand drafting game, a pick and pass, is that you have this new pyramid drafting. You've got this display of cards each round. Some are face up, some face down, but you can only access the ones at the bottom of the pyramid. And then once you take cards, that reveals other ones. They then become available to take. So you can see ahead what's going to come up, but you can't access it all right now. So it allows for some strategizing, some really interesting thought about what you'll make available to your opponent. But it also doesn't make the decisions in the moment that complicated because you might only have like 3 cards to choose from. It's such a clever idea that just totally changes the game. I think it's the first example of pyramid drafting. I assume they invented it. We've had other games since. That's the kind of magic of this game. The theme, the gameplay is quite dry, and there's some fiddliness with the resources, just some like little intricacies with the rules that don't make it as smooth as I'd like. But sort of objectively, it's such a brilliant two-player design, so much kind of strategic thinking that you can't rate it that badly. So I'm giving this one formidable. Also in 2015 is another two-player only game, Raptor. This is a co-design with Bruno Cathala with a really cool theme that one player plays as these scientists that are trying to steal some baby raptors from a velociraptor, and the other one plays as the mother velociraptor trying to get her babies to safety. So it's this asymmetric, almost abstract game where you simultaneously pick cards. So a bit like Harry Ichiban, you've got numbers that you reveal. The lower number, only they will get to do the action that's on the card, whereas the higher number gets action points equal to the difference between those numbers. So if they play a 9 and they play a 1, that's 8 action points, so you could do a lot. And thematically, there's really cool stuff about the scientists can shoot at the raptors or start fires, and the raptors can attack the scientists and kill them. But really, it feels like an abstract kind of movement. And the thing that I found frustrating about the game is just that constant cancelling of the actions that you want to do. If you end up, often by chance, playing the higher number, you never get to do what you actually want to do, and it can feel just quite frustrating. For me, like, the theme of it, the artwork of this is so incredible that you're almost like grasping to find a better game than is within it. And I feel like if it was as good as you want it to be, this game would be a huge hit, because who doesn't love dinosaurs, right? As it is, I give it more goatee than goat. 2016 sees the release of King Domino, and for me, this is the game that solidifies Bruno Cathala as a great. It's not even one of my favorites of his, but it just is such a masterclass of simplicity. You can't help but be impressed. It's a tile laying game where you're each building your own little kingdom, and it uses dominoes in a really clever way. Each of the tiles in the game has 2 squares on it that represent 2 different terrains in your kingdom. So you've got oceans and grasslands and wheat fields. And so you are trying to connect those dominoes up to expand more regions of that type within a very tight 5x5 grid. And then the really important mechanism are these crown symbols. Now, this is borrowed from Sobek. It's those multipliers that you need the crowns within that region to multiply. So if you've got 10 different ocean squares, but only 1 crown, then it's only worth 10 points. But if you've got 3 crowns, then that's 30 points. It's so important. And the way you draft the dominoes is clever because they're ordered in terms of how good they are. So if you pick the best one round, that means you're going to get last pick next round. So you've got to weigh up, is it worth going for the best one if you're then going to have no option next time? And it's so simple. It's great for families, great with young kids. There's almost nothing to the rules, but there's important decisions at every step, and that just makes a brilliant game. Now, I find it a little bit boring because you're very much doing your own thing, and so for that reason, I give it formidable. Also in 2016 is a Game of Thrones Hand of the King, which is a little filler card game that was released with the Game of Thrones IP back when that was really hot. It's kind of like an abstract game. You've got this big grid of characters, and you're moving Varys in the rows and columns to collect those characters. So I might move it to Ned Stark and take Ned Stark. But that means that I can now see that the next player can move along that row or column. So you can slightly plan ahead. You can see, oh, if I take Ned Stark, that's opening them up Cersei Lannister. You're trying to get the most of a particular house, so like most Starks, to claim their banner. And at the end of the game, the player with the most banners wins. But if you take the last character in a house, you get a special ability, and that just kind of messes with things a little bit. It's quite a neat, clever game. The only downside to it is that it doesn't feel like there's loads of agency. Like, often you feel like you're doing the obvious thing. But as filler games go, it's pretty solid. It's quite a nice theme that pairs with it. Didn't quite stick around in my collection though, so it's more goatee than goat. Also in 2016 is Seven Wonders Duel Pantheon, which is an expansion to Seven Wonders Duel. This adds the pantheon of gods, and it adds some interesting like long-term strategy, because in the first round you will be picking gods and placing them out, and depending on where you place them, they will cost more for them than for you. It's kind of like you decide which gods you want to use, but not until later. So it gives you this kind of long-term thinking, which is quite clever. It also gives you a reason to want to flip cards. So in Seven Wonders Duel, you've got these face-down cards. You never want to reveal them or free them up for your opponent, because who knows what's there? It could give away something really good. In this, you actually get a reward for that. So it sort of balances it out, gives you interesting reasons to want to let your opponent have more options. It adds more faff to a game that's already got quite a lot of faff. So I personally don't love playing with it, but at the same time, I can't really fault what it adds. So I'm giving it more goatee than goat. Also in 2016 is Zany Penguins, which is a co-design with Mathieu Lanvin. Is a filler game, but it's sort of deeper than you might think. It looks like this very cute, fluffy game, but it's got some interesting stuff going on. You're drafting cards. You're doing it in a slightly strange way. You've got a hand of cards, but then you give a card to both of your neighbors, and then you take the 2 cards your neighbors give you and you decide on one to play in front of you. You're trying to get the majority in colors, because at the end of the game, you'll only score cards in your hand if you have the majority of that color in front of you. It's probably a bit more complicated than you want from this level of game, and the artwork really undersells it. As much as I like the ideas, I'm not sure it comes together in like a complete package that I loved. So more goatee than goat. Still in 2016 is Kanagawa. This is a very beautiful looking game set in 1840s Japan. You are trying to learn how to paint. Whilst it looks like a bigger game, it's quite a simple card game underneath it all. You're drafting cards to add to a tableau. You either add it to sort of your workshop, improve your skills, or you add it to your painting. So there's multi-use cards. And the way you get those cards is sort of the interesting bit of the game, where you can push your luck a bit, wait to see if more will be added to the columns, or take something that you really want right now. But you can only add cards to your painting if you've got the right icons in your studio. And I felt like the luck of the draw in this game was quite punishing, that you'd often just be frustrated by what you could do. There's nothing particularly original or interesting here, and there's not much player interaction either, so I wasn't into this one. We don't talk about Bruno. In 2017, we have Oliver Twist. This is a redesign of Sobek, co-designed with Sebastian Porchon, designer of Jaipur and Skyrise. Set in the world of Oliver Twist, you've got this big run of tiles that represent the houses that you can steal from. And you've got to decide, do you take the one that's in front of you, or do you jump further ahead? Every tile you jump over goes in your police file. That's your corruption mechanism. And so the person with the biggest police file at the end of the round is going to have to pay a fine to the police, and that's going to lose you points. Then you're trying to collect sets of different loot to sell to Fagin. The sooner you sell those sets, the more money you're going to get, a bit like in Sobek. It retains like some of the great bits about that game. It adds this extra night phase, which has sort of like a push your luck mechanism. I didn't feel like it was necessary. It sort of makes the game a bit more complicated. But generally, like, I do really like the game. I think the theme really comes out. It's a beautiful production. And so I'm giving it creme brulee. Also in 2017 comes Yamatai. This is one of his heavier games, another Days of Wonder game. This is a co-design with Mark Pakian, the designer of Treasure Island. In this one, you've got this archipelago of islands. You're sending out ships and then clearing those islands and then building on them to try and score points. It's quite themeless, I would say, but there's a lot of strategy. There's a lot going on in terms of what you can do. And it kind of has this, like, it's a slow progress to, you got to get the ships to spread out to then clear the islands, and then you got to build on them later. And you're trying to build next to islands you already own to get more points that way. There's a lot to consider with every decision. For me, it's a bit dry, themeless. I feel like if you're into that kind of game, there's probably a lot of other games you prefer to play than Yamatai. But at the same time, it's solid. Everything ties together. You know, there is, every decision matters. It just doesn't quite sing. And so I give it more goatee than goat. In 2017, we got Queen Domino, which is the inevitable sequel to the really big success story of King Domino. This is where they've taken this simple game and added more stuff to it. So now you can tax your lands to get money and use that money to build buildings to get points. it adds more complication to a game that I don't think can withstand it. In theory, when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, King Domino is kind of simple. Why not add more stuff? But I just don't think what it adds really flows with the original game. And it almost, to me, reveals that, no, it should be as simple as it is. It doesn't need more. The more is just making it worse. It's We Don't Talk About Bruno. In 2018 comes Micropolis. This is a co-design with Charles Chevalier from Abyss. And in this, you're building an ant colony. It's a family weight game. You're drafting tiles that just create a circle at the end of the game that represent your ant colony. And you're trying to place ants on it as well. So when you draft the tiles, you can decide to either take the first one or put ants on it to sort of pay to go further in. So you're giving those ants to the person that eventually takes that tile because you don't want it right now. And each tile has a character on it that will do a certain action. There is a few different ways to score at the end of the game. You've got set collection of fruits. You're trying to have the highest population. So there's a little bit of competition there in terms of like trying to outdo your opponents, but a lot of it is focused very much on your own board because that's what you're building. And for me, it's not quite interactive enough. But at the same time, it's a perfectly pleasant family game. It's quite quick, easy to understand, nice artwork. I had good times with Micropolis. I just feel like there are better games out there and the box was way too big for the experience you got. So it's more goatee than goat. In 2019 comes Conspiracy: Abyss Universe, which is another co-design with Charles Chevalier from Abyss. And it is set in that hideous Abyss universe that I can't stand. But this is a game I much prefer. It's a much simpler card game take on Abyss in a little tin. And in this, you are building this upside down pyramid that is your sort of political structure. So you are drafting these cards that add. But the drafting is much simpler than the original game. Because on your turn, you decide you can take 1, 2, or 3 cards from the draw pile. If you take 3, you're only going to pick 1, but the other 2 will then add to the display, and the display is per color. So if there's a real collection of blue politicians, someone can just grab all of them on the next turn and just fill up their pyramid. And there's a really interesting race mechanism in that if someone finishes their pyramid, that's game over, and you've spent way too long kind of perfecting it. You get points at the end of the game for your biggest connected group of the same color, which is really cool, but then also points for your best politician of each color, so that sort of counterbalances it. Really cool decisions, collecting keys, which will also unlock scoring conditions. It keeps some of those ideas of Abyss in a much simpler, better game for me. I would never touch Abyss. I've kept this game for quite a long time. I think it's a solid small game, and yet I hate the artwork. Everyone I introduce it to is just, why is it this? It could be anything, and it's like the worst possible thing. Nevertheless, I like the game. It's formidable. Still in 2019, we have King Domino Duel, which is a 2-player only roll and write take on King Domino, co-designed by Ludovic Maublanc. And in this, you roll the dice, you take it in turns to pick the dice, and then you put them together to create a domino, and then those dominoes go on your little sheet of paper that acts like your kingdom. It has ideas from King Domino, and yet somehow makes it more boring. It doesn't feel like a duel at all to me. It's much less sort of attractive and pleasant to play because you don't have those domino tiles. There's just a lot of luck in terms of the dice rolling and not getting what you want. I didn't like this one. We need to talk, we don't talk about Bruno or this game. Still in 2019, we have Naga Raja, which is another 2-player only game, but this one is quite unusual and strange. This is a co-design with Théo Rivière, and this is sort of the start of a new generation of French designers that Bruno starts collaborating with. For, the last 10 or more years, it's been a lot of the same names, and then he really opens it up. It's really interesting that he is able to collaborate with so many different names and kind of create great games together. So that's really cool. But it's just quite a weird game, especially to describe. You each have your own board and you're trying to connect up pathways to get to gems. But to get pathways, you're sort of dueling it out to get those tiles to put onto your board. And they are little, a left or a little pathway, a little crossroads. To get those tiles, you play a card that dictates how many sticks you get to throw. Then the symbols on the sticks that you throw will determine how many cards you can play, and then the person who does the best in that card play gets that tile. It's so convoluted. It's like something out of the Cones of Dunshire. I don't know why anyone finds that fun. It feels too much. And yet there's something about this pathway puzzle that's kind of interesting. And you also have these cursed relics, which if you can like force your opponent to reveal those, then you immediately win the game. So there is some cool ideas in there. It's an interesting theme, and the throwing the sticks is kind of a bit different. It feels like it wants streamlining for me. There's too much faff. So more goatee than goat. Still in 2019, we have Ishtar, Gardens of Babylon. This is a co-design with a man called Evan Singh, which I know is a pseudonym. So we don't know who that person is. Could be Banksy. This is a tile laying game where you are playing on a shared board. You are playing these garden tiles that are sort of like an underlay. Where you place them in the desert will collect you gems. You use those gems to build trees. Trees will get you points, but you also want them adjacent to fountains. It's not a very intuitive game. It feels like there's a lot going on, but it doesn't ever really kind of click. I like that it's a shared board and there's sort of like trying to get things ahead of your opponents, but I don't really like the journey to that step. So we don't talk about Bruno. In 2020, we've got Velonimo. This is a very simple card game, a ladder climbing game. So based on classic card games of years gone by, you're playing numbered cards to beat what's gone before. You're trying to stay in the round, and you compare cards together to create like better sets. You also can steal cards in this game, which sort of like slows it down. I'm not a huge ladder climbing fan. I didn't find anything in this one to really stand out or make me want to keep coming back to it. Probably one that if you played and played and played, you could find the little intricacies, but they weren't immediate enough for me to ever want to introduce it to new people. I couldn't find the joy, so we don't talk about Bruno. Still in 2020, we have Trek 12 Himalaya. This is another new co-designer, Corentin Lebrat. He is the co-designer of Far Away and Tag Team. And this is a roll and write game where you are trying to climb a mountain. So you roll some dice and you can decide with the dice. You can have the lower one, the higher one. You can combine the two. You can minus one from the other. You can times them together to create a number, which for me is too many options. You're trying to create runs of numbers on this mountain or kind of clusters of the same number to get points. I found this one so dry and unappealing. It came at a time when we'd had a lot of roll and write games, and this one felt like it wasn't adding anything new or exciting. This one just didn't do it for me at all. This is Bruno Cathala. But in 2021, we get a great game. This is Sobek 2 players. This is co-designed with Sébastien Porchon. This brings a board to Sobek, and it's 2-player only game, where you are in this market collecting tiles. But when you move the pawn to a tile, that space or that tile will tell you which direction the pawn points to next. And so you can see what tiles you'll open up to the next person. So it's like Game of Thrones Hand of the King in that regard, but better because there's diagonals in this. So you can see the line of tiles, and it keeps the corruption mechanism. Now you can jump over tiles, but the tiles you jump over will go in your corruption pile. There's character powers, which Bruno loves and play really nicely here. And there's powers for completing sets early, but then you won't be able to add to that set later. It's still got those multiplier scarab symbols. This is such a brilliant game. I love the struggle in it. I wish it was called Sobek Duel, because it really feels like a fight that everything you do, you're trying to stop your opponent from getting what they want. And there's so many different ways you can do that in this game. So this is our first French Revolutionary. Still in 2021 is Mandragora. This is a co-design with Florian Siriex, who designed the Art Project and After Us. This is a very simple filler card game. You have a circle of cards that represent different magic shops, and you move the pawn 1, 2, or 3 spaces along and collect what's at a shop. The shops will like refill, and you're just deciding which cards to draw. If you're trying to collect sets, when you have a set, you can cast a spell and you get a special ability. It's really just like, you know, simple but meaningful decisions. You can get curses at these shops. You don't want curses. It's like a perfectly fine game, but also quite forgettable. I'm giving this more goatee than goat. Still in 2021, we have another little card game called Oh My Brain. This is co-designed with Theo Riviere. And this is another ladder climbing game with an interesting mechanism in that you've got a symmetry of cards in front of you on a card holder. So they're not in your hand, they're sort of a secondary hand that you'll get to. You have to get rid of your hand and what's in that card holder to be able to sort of go out of the round and win the round. But you can't play them right now, and there's some kind of little, movements between the symmetry in your hand and stuff. I didn't really feel like I was vibing with what it brings to the game. It's different, but is it great? And ultimately, if you can't play in a round, you lose a brain. So you have these like lives, and then that's what's gonna like bring you towards the end of the game. It didn't stick with me, this one. It felt fussy, but without really seeing the benefit of that fuss. So we don't talk about Bruno. In 2022, we get Orichalcum. This is a co-design with Ioan Gupi, who designed Far Away and Pixies. This is one of his bigger games. It's set in ancient Greece, and you are placing tiles onto your own board. You're going to be building buildings, collecting Orichalcum, this magical resource, and hoplites, like troops that you need to get into fights. The tiles that you take, they come from these action cards. So you get an action and a tile, which is a very interesting, tough decision. Definitely brings some AP. So you place a tile onto your board and get an action. Some of those are going to be like engine building or using your engine to get more troops. You need those troops to fight monsters. You're ultimately trying to get these victory points, which you get from building temples, and there's different ways to get them, but you're sort of building up to them in a number of different ways. There's a lot going on, as you can tell from this explanation, and yet it does all kind of come together, but it definitely bogs down in downtime. The decision of what action to take, and then even playing that out, is a lot. So in the bigger player counts, you are waiting a while, which is definitely a mark against it. There's a race element, which I really like, trying to get ahead of your opponent, sometimes trying to block them by taking the actions that they need, but ultimately you are focused on your own board a lot, which isn't quite to my taste. Nevertheless, I did have fun with this one. I'm giving it Formidable. Also in 2022, we get Splendor Duel, which is a co-design with Marc-Andre, the designer of Splendor and Middle Ages. And this really solidifies Bruno as like the ultimate two-player designer, because he's taking Seven Wonders and Splendor, working with them and creating brilliant two-player games of those original classics. Splendor is this engine building game where you're collecting gems that sort of become your buying power to then get more stuff. And it's just kind of this constant building. I don't love the original game. It's okay, but Splendor Duel adds more interaction, more of this dual nature, which I do really like. Everything that they add to this game, for me, improves upon Splendor. So you've now got a spatial thing going on because you have this board of gems where you're collecting from, which is a really nice extra thing to get your head around. And when you refill that board is so interesting because you don't want to allow your opponent to get certain gems. So do you refill because you want more options? But no, that means that they'll get what they want. There's also 3 different types of points in this game. So you're sort of racing to get the target you need for 1 or 2 or all 3 of them maybe. It's just kind of funny, like multiple paths to victory in such a small game. I like everything it does. I think it really improves upon Splendor, but still at the heart, there's this kind of AP-inducing engine building where you can plan ahead and you're like, okay, so I'll buy that, I'll buy that. It locks my brain up just like Splendor, and it's that bit that doesn't make me love it. But it is a brilliant 2-player game, and if you're into that kind of thing, then you should definitely try Splendor Duel. I'm giving it Formidable. And in 2022, we get Sea Salt and Paper. This is my favorite Bruno Cathala game, one of my favorite games of all time, and it's a little card game that comes in a small box. This is co-designed with Theo Riviere, and it's just got so many cool things going on. At its heart, it's a set collection game. You are taking either 2 cards off the top and picking one, or you are taking from what you can see in the discard pile. So there's this great decision every turn of, can I get something better than this, the mystery prize, or should I just take what I can see because that kind of works with what I've got? You've got these pairs of action cards. You need 2 to be able to play them together, and that allows you extra actions. It's all about trying to do more than your opponent because you're racing to get 7 points. As soon as you get to 7 points, you can stop the round and score them, or you can say, no, I give you a last chance. I don't think you can get more points than me. And that's just this fun bravado thing. It's just such a cool element to the game that I just really love. There's also this instant win condition. If you ever miraculously get 4 mermaid cards, there's only 4 in the deck, you win the whole game, not just the round. But that's never happened to me. It just feels like such a bigger game than its box. I think it's absolutely brilliant. This is French Revolutionary all day. And in 2023, we got an expansion to Sea Salt and Paper, Extra Salt, which comes in this tiny little packet. It's very cheap, and you get 8 cards. They just add new actions, cool things to there. All of them different to what you already had. You've got like the lobster, which lets you look through the top 5 cards of the deck and pick one. There's a jellyfish that can sting other players. There's wild cards that now add to sets. You don't need it, but it is cool. It fits in the box. Why wouldn't you treat yourself to it? I really like it. It's creme brulee. Also in 2023 is Donuts. This is a 2-player only abstract game where you are placing your colored donuts out onto the board, trying to create a row of 5 to win the game. This has an idea that's kind of from Sobek 2 Players, where you place on that space on the board, it has a direction. So it then tells your opponent where they can place. You've got that immediate, so apparent strategy to the game because you can see, oh, that will allow them to go there and then they might allow me to go there. You can really plan a few turns ahead, but without really having to understand the game that much. The twist of the game really is that you can, if you insert one of your donuts between 2 others of theirs, then you get to flip theirs and convert them into yours. So originally this game was called Insert, and it was on Board Game Arena, but then it got released with a theme. That is the kind of key of the game, but it doesn't happen loads, and you're trying to sort of influence that happening, but I haven't really found it particularly easy to influence that. And abstract games are incredibly hard to design. For me, hard to find a game that's this simple that has that kind of magic behind it. And I've played this quite a lot, and it just doesn't really ignite into something that I love. And I so want it to, because on the face of it, the ideas are great, simple. There's nothing to dislike about it until you sort of play it and it just doesn't quite come alive in the way you want. Maybe it needs more plays, but I'm skeptical. More goatee than goat. In 2024, we get Lord of the Rings: A Duel for Middle-earth, which is a remake of Seven Wonders Duel, but set in the Lord of the Rings universe. This is also a co-design with Antoine Bowser. This takes it up a notch for me because now it's got 3 instant win conditions. There's no points at the end of the game. There is no end of the game. One of you's going to win before you get to that because you've got collecting all of the races or allying with the races. That is like the science cards in the original game. And then you've got this ring track that you're trying to race to get to the end of. Or you can win on the map. There's now a map and you're trying to control or have presence in all of the locations on the map of Middle-earth. Whoever does one of those things first will win the game. So there's this constant threat, handing too much of one of those tugs of war to, you let go of a rope and now you've lost the game because you've got to keep your eye on all 3 of them. You're not going to win on all 3 of them yourself, but you've got to kind of focus on 1 or 2 because if they kill you off on 1, you need a backup plan. It fixes the fiddliness that Seven Wonders Duel has with the resources because now if you're missing anything, everything just costs a gold, so that's great. And then the theme just makes it more approachable. People are much more likely to want to play the game, and the artwork in this one is gorgeous. And I'm not a Lord of the Rings guy, but for me, I'd much prefer to play this game. It is still kind of dry. There's not a lot of theme. I mean, I just point to the ring track. It's literally just this path that you move along. That feels very mechanical because it is. The gameplay underneath is brilliant and I give it a creme brulee. Still in 2024 is Solstice. This is a 2-player only game designed with Corentin Lebras. This is a tile laying game where you're trying to complete a panorama, but the tiles go in fixed positions. So you're just trying to fill out this picture by getting tiles that all connect to each other, because at the end of the game, you'll score for your biggest connected group. But of course, your opponent is also taking those tiles, so you're only going to get half of them. You're also trying to create little 2x2 grids. They get you the spirits, and this feels quintessentially Bruno with the effectively character powers. They either get you an action right now, which will get you more tiles, or give you more endgame scoring. And there's a few ways to score. You also have these fires at the top of the mountain. They have to be connected all the way down to the bottom to be worth anything. So you'll get a load of them, and then your opponent will really try to cut you off from completing that. I love this game more than most people on this earth, because I've played it over 500 times on Board Game Arena this last year. I love it in real life too, but it's much easier to play games online. There's so many little intricacies that I appreciate about it. There is a lot of luck, but I really enjoy seeing that luck play out and riding it and trying to work around it. Some of the special powers just can really swing the game in your direction, and the thought about when you use certain tiles, you're playing them from your hand and you're sort of deciding, do I give this up? If I play a 6 red, then I won't have the 6 to get... I can't go that deep into it, but I have thought about this game a lot, because the more I play it, the more I appreciate it. I think it's genius. It's French revolutionary. And in 2025, we get Cyclades Legendary Edition, and we're in a purple patch here because this is a new, improved version of Cyclades that adds some of the stuff from the original expansions. I never played the Hades or Titans expansion from the original. This kind of takes some of that, bolts it on, but adds new bits and twists it a little bit. It's a modernization of the original game with new artwork and with a modular board, which I hate setting up, but obviously means that every time you play, you get a slightly different map. It now adds heroes that you can recruit, and they allow you better movement on the board. So typically you could only move your troops by getting the Ares god power. Now your heroes can move you as long as you have one. They're kind of like this new dimension to the game that you've really got to pay attention to. There's also these monsters that go onto the board and you don't own them, but you sort of pay to feed them. And they're often just very destructive to other players. They're quite incredible. It adds more going on, but I think it makes the game a bit more dynamic. There is probably more combat now. You could definitely consider it to be maybe less strategic. It's slightly less about the auction. It's just shifted the focus a bit. Slightly more towards the kind of risk thing that I was talking about, but, still nowhere near risk. It's longer now, and there's a couple of the powers. There's this Pegasus monster and Jason hero that really open up the board for movement, that allow you to kind of move anywhere, which sort of been the climax of a couple of games, to the point where I'm like, do I take those out? But then am I unbalancing the game? So there's little bits that I would have to play it, 50 times to understand quite whether I felt they were a flaw or they're just something you have to kind of play around. But the core of the game is beautiful. This is French revolutionary. Also in 2025 is Sea Salt and Paper Extra Pepper expansion, another one of those little packets, and quite a surprising addition because it adds these conditions to each round. So you'll just flip a card for a round and it will change the rules very slightly. It might make something more powerful, a particular action, or make something cheaper. You'll play with it for a round, and then at the end of that round, the player with the most points will win that card if it's sort of bad. Or if it's good, it will go to the player with the least points. And then it becomes in front of them and it's like a permanent power, but only for them. It's this really interesting balancing thing, but you can totally use it to your advantage. Effectively take less points on purpose so that you get this power that's then going to make you even stronger in the later rounds. It adds this whole new dimension to the game, but it's such a slight idea. Of course, there's more rules to follow now, so that's like the only downside. And you wouldn't want to play with it always, but what a cool thing to add to the game. It just totally refreshes the game if, you've played it 100 times. Just a tiny pack of cards. It can do so much. So this is creme brulee. Still in 2025, we get Gatsby, which is a 2-player only game set in the world of the Great Gatsby. This is a co-design with Ludovic Maublanc. I talked about this one in my last 10 couples games, so definitely check that out for more detail. But this is a really cool, like, head-to-head 2-player game, very much in Bruno's wheelhouse. You're fighting over friends of Gatsby. You're trying to collect these character tiles, either get 3 of the same color or 1 of each color. You're winning them at the cabaret, at Wall Street, and at the horse races. You're just picking an action where you want to go each time. But there's just so much of like messing with your opponent. Some of the friends are face down, so you don't know which are which. You don't even know which set to go towards because some of the tiles are out of the game, and so you've got to try and understand what's out there before you push for a certain victory that might be impossible. But you're swapping tiles around, because you think, oh, I'm going to win there. I need to put the tile I need there. But then your opponent is like, oh, wow, they really are trying to go for that. I need to make sure I get that. There's just some really lovely interplay that you only ever get with two-player games, where you force them to take an action they don't want because that's going to allow you to do something else. It's really tense, I find. Quite tricky to work out how to get what you want. You're not going to get everything. It's going to feel quite demoralizing, but you just need to get what you need. And that's what you've got to kind of settle for and really, like, in a Machiavellian way, make that happen for yourself. I think this one's a great couples game. I'm giving it creme brulee. On the other side of things is Legion's Abyss Universe. This is the third game in the Abyss universe. This is a two-player only lane battling game. It's a card game. It's co-designed by Charles Chevalier and Johan Gupi. And for me, this is a convoluted mess. You've got the same picking a number and revealing it as we had in Haru Ichiban, of like the lowest gets to do something different, the highest gets something else. It's just the kind of drawn out steps to each turn just don't flow. It feels so overly complicated compared to other great lane battling games. You know, competing against Schottentotten or Airland and Sea, this game is like 5 times more complicated and nowhere near as good. So yeah, this one just didn't hit for me at all. This is Bruno Cathala. Also in 2025 is Celestia Duo. This is a cooperative 2-player game that is a spin-off of Celestia, which Bruno didn't design originally, but it's using that universe, and you are trying to catch Sky Pirate. You're catching up with them along these clouds, this track that you're moving along. And it's got limited communication. You can't tell each other what cards you're going to play. You're trying to deal with dice symbols like in the original game by playing cards. And yet the limited communication just doesn't feel that important in this game. You know, in some games like Hanabi, it's like vital. In this, the decisions feel more obvious, so it doesn't feel as tense, that you're not trying to read each other's mind as much. And the luck of this game is brutal. Whether you get to move 1, 2, or 3 spaces is so important to whether you'll have any chance of catching the pirate. And it's kind of down to the card shuffle. You just get punished. I didn't find anything to like in this game, and I love original Celestia, but it doesn't really feel like that at all. And it also just felt incredibly repetitive. You just do the same thing every turn and then lose. So this is Bruno Cathala. And finally, in 2025, we get Solstice Firefly, which is an expansion to Firefly, and that makes it even better. It adds such small things. It's one of these little packets. You get these fireflies that you only get if you manage to collect 2 spirits at the same time on the same turn, which is where you have a 2x2 little square completed. That's incredibly hard to do, but if you do that, you get a firefly, and if you get 4 fireflies, then you immediately win the game. So it has this instant win condition that you've got to constantly worry about that your opponent is racing towards, and yet it's achievable. It's not like the 4 mermaids in Sea Salt and Paper. I have had the 4 fireflies in this version of the game loads of times, and it feels great and annoying when someone else gets it. It also adds some extra spirits, and some of them are really good, like being able to steal one of their tiles, but only if it's not connected to other stuff. So you've really got to watch out for it because someone could steal one of yours. I love everything this expansion adds, and it adds, you know, like it adds like 6 tokens or something, but it's just totally worth it. This is a very rare French Revolutionary expansion. And that's it. Those are my favorite and not so favorite Bruno Cathala games. Please tell me which of his games you like in the comments. And I definitely missed some. I would love to try Senji. And there's definitely some others that are out of print and I just can't get my hands on. Let me know in the comments if you think some of his older games still hold up that are worth like looking back into. If you're out there, Bruno, thank you for making so many brilliant board games. Your influence on this hobby is just like incredible. You can see it in so many other designers. And thank you for collaborating with so many people and like bringing them into our industry, because so many of these people have gone on to brilliant things, and you're clearly, I just love the way that you influence each other, sharing ideas. It just makes for such like an interesting side of the industry that you see a lot more in France than it feels like other countries, at least from my perspective. So yeah, this was a lot of fun to do. Thanks so much for watching. If you like it, then please support the channel on Patreon, because that's how I can invest the time to do these ridiculous sort of challenges. And if you like this video, then subscribe to see more like it. I'm John Perkis. Thanks for watching.